It's International Women's Day, and the issue of gender equality has never been more present. The HSRC believes focusing on women in maths and science will help bridge the divide. The Council's Dr. Palesa Sekhejane joins us from Johannesburg, in Sandton to be precise, to discuss these efforts and whether or not we're gaining enough ground in these important spaces. Doctor, thanks for your time this afternoon. Hashtag Embrace Equity is the official theme for this year's International Women's Day. And embrace, I feel like, is a very important word, because it's all well and good that we all know that we need equity in important spaces where women haven't been made to feel welcome or comfortable or have been represented before. But embracing it is a completely different matter altogether, wouldn't you agree?
No, definitely we have to embrace it. We have to ensure that we also set up our institutional policies. And I think most of the time when I talk about the policies, in the institution, but also the culture, I think, and also the societies that we come in, we have to embrace that, because the space, is made up of the conditions that we find ourselves functioning in. And that's where, if you are embracing it, I think, we encourage, we create also a space for debating and a space of really allowing ourselves not to be so ashamed to look back and to own up the progresses that we have made, and also the challenges that we face. Because without that component of embracing those challenges that fit into our day-to-day workspaces or conditions, it becomes a little bit difficult to understand where we can make the shifts.
And also, I was speaking to somebody, a woman who is a fleet manager in the automotive industry, a space that's known to be mostly male-dominated. And we were saying that gender equity in industries that are male-dominated isn't a nice to have. It makes business sense. Why have we found it so difficult to understand that concept?
I think that concept of equality also emanates from us, our social formations. So unfortunately, we are going to keep on carrying over what we have learned in our social spaces, right from our homes. And this has always been the issue. I think we've talked about it a lot. But then for me, it would rather be, what is it that we are doing or not doing to ensure that there is that change? Because, talking about it and not wanting to engage with knowledge, not wanting to engage with what's at our disposal to start making those shifts, it becomes an important conversation in talking about equity, and equality issues. But I think this specifically, equity being the key word, because it really talks about from which base are we starting from. We are not all starting from an equal base.
Now, the HSRC this year around wants to focus on maths and science and the progress of girls, young women, and women in leadership positions in those spaces. I think back immediately to our matric results, and we're seeing year on year, we're seeing some of our top achievers in maths and science being girls who get interviewed at the time of the results coming out with the bright lights in their eyes about what they want to study in the science and maths space. Are we seeing those successes transitioning into our spaces of innovation, in tech, in the corporate space? What's happening to those young women that show an early talent in maths and science? Are we seeing them transition into those spaces of leadership 5, 10, 15 years down the line?
Great. And so I'm going to answer that with what emanated from the discussion, so that you and the viewers can judge for yourself, or formulate an opinion for yourself. So one of the some of the participants made comment with regards to when you go to the corporate space, right? So that's in the private sector, where it becomes so obvious that it's issue of male, female, and races. right? And that is in the context of South Africa. When you go to the other regions in Africa, because also we are talking international, so we're just not talking South African issues, it becomes male and female issues. And that is not to minimize other identities, but just, in terms of male and female. So it's no longer about male, female, and then and other issues in between compared to South Africa. That's point number one. And then transitioning into leadership, or transitioning into the spaces where, you see the growth and development in their careers. We must admit that globally, we are still seeing about 30% of women in the mathematics and science. But also the presentation from Dr. Vijay Reddy, which was really based on the progress of girls in the mathematics and science in school learning environment, is that girls in high school, they outperform boys. Now, a critical point of discussion there, because now it shifts the discussion in terms of it's no longer now an issue of girls are not doing well in mathematics and science. They are doing well. In the context of South Africa, the education, or the quality of education that they are receiving, is weak. One. And then when you compare it to other countries, such as those in rich countries, with developed economies and stable, there is no difference between girl and boy in their mathematics or science performance. So one of the questions that were prompted was that, so what are these propelling conditions that now make the boy child to remain behind? And the recommendation was that, or some of the elements that they are picking up, is that it has to do with issue of safety and security. There's a lot of bullying in schools.
Sure.
It's affecting learners. Boys end up also not having mentors because there is so much focus around girls. But then I think it is a debate of, now we are able to talk about the positive outcomes of investing in girl child as far as mathematics and science are concerned in this discussion. But now this prevailing circumstance, because the intention, so we are dealing with unintended consequences. The intention was to ensure that there would be no difference between boy and girl. So clearly it's no longer just an issue of us being a lower upper income country, because it shows we have a potential to perform like those stronger economic countries. But then what are other circumstances that are costing us the benefits of a boy child or males or an entire gender cosmos performing equally?
Just one final question before I let you go, because this really could be a conversation that can go on for some time. It sounds like we're looking at a complex list of influences. Is our education system making these spaces encouraging to girls to feel like those are routes that they can follow? But then, as you mentioned earlier, what are the set of circumstances at home? What is being encouraged or discouraged at home? Are we still sitting with girls who perhaps have a passion for science and mathematics, but they find themselves in a community or family where they're being told, oh, but that's not a space for women. You should rather be focusing on accounting, or why don't you go and become a teacher? How much of those are, in terms of the push-pull factor, what do you think is more important in terms of where we need to be focusing on in trying to improve the situation for our young women who want to go into those sectors?
So I think you are quite correct. We are dealing with multiple sets of influences, and I think so the narrative has changed, and I think it changed, and it might have left us behind, but also some of the influences that I can think about, for instance, is that now we have women being empowered and working, right? They're employed. Whereas, in the beginning, in the past, there were fewer women who were employed, or perhaps that were, and I'm not saying that, I'm not speaking about this in relation to employment or unemployment dimensions and statistics and so on. It's just on a scenario setting. So now that the makeup of households has changed, the kinds of jobs that are also out there that and that most likely putting pressure into family, what is that home context that is grounding and motivating for women or women to be participating, or girls to be participating in the mathematics or the science areas? But also, I think it's the importance of, are we looking at scientists being remunerated, their salaries? You know, is the science making impact on the ground? Does it make a case for motivation? I mean, like, I'm coming from the science background. And of course I advocate for that. So I'm likely to be biased, but then we have to open up those kinds of conversations in terms of what is the impact of science, getting into the science and the outputs that we get from science. We are conducting good science. I'm not disputing that. And also, I think we are putting in a good enough campaigns that push the participation of women or girls in the science and mathematics fields. And by all means, as from the South Africa's position, I think we have been doing well. But then I think now, before we lose out on those who are already participating or having an interest in the mathematics and science, we need to be prepared. So we also need future preparedness into these discussions as to what will make us to still hold this conversation in the next 5 years. What is the compelling case? How is the house, not a household per se, but what is the home context, you know, that feeds into influencing women or girls, or strengthening participation of boys? Because currently now in South Africa, now we are sitting with that, needing to encourage boys to also do well in mathematics. They are doing well as once they get into the work arena. But then now, if we are losing them to poor participation in mathematics and science, poor performance, it means that output is also likely to change in future.
Very, very important point, and an important conversation to continue having. Thank you so much for your insight this afternoon. That's Dr. Palesa Sekhejane. She's the HSRC Strategic Partnership Director, bringing us just some of the important talking points from their event held a little bit earlier.